What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Take a step in. Have a look around. Look at that animal over there. What's that? I don't know. But anyway, hope you've been having a good week. On this episode, we're jumping straight back into the Congo. My last episode was on the Congolese giant snake, and I tell you what, the Congolese jungle is no lacking of crazy animals and cryptids and things like that. While we're here in the Congo, let's stay here and talk about another crazy animal that is said to live there, and that is the water elephant. Now, when I say water elephant, I don't mean an elephant that just likes water a little bit more than your normal elephant, and normal elephants love water. This is completely different. It goes by the Teke language, and it's called the Ndoko na Maji, which I guess translates to water elephant, funnily enough. Now, it's a proboscidean, which is reported from lakes and swamps in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, in sort of East Africa, West Africa, and that sort of general area, there is an elephant species called the forest elephant, which is Loxodonta cyclotis, and it's not that, okay? This elephant, and I'm unquoting here, looks quite different to how you would picture an elephant, okay? Now, I'm going to read some descriptions of it and also some sightings of this elephant, and there's been quite a few, okay? So, rumors of a tapir-like animal existing in the lower Congo were extant for more than a decade before the water elephant was famously reported in 1911 in the first edition of Encyclopedia of Sport in 1898. Under the tapir entry, okay, so somebody entered into this Encyclopedia of Sport that there are tapir in the Congo, which, as we know, tapir live in parts of Southeast Asia and South America, sort of, well, Central South America. I guess they kind of wander up pretty far north. Anyway, big game hunter Fitzwilliam Thomas Pollock claimed that, I quote, "There is a similar looking animal in the lagoons of West Africa below the Congo. I saw one or two, but failed to bag them." Okay, so he's reported seeing tapir-like animals in the Congo, but he failed to shoot and kill one, which I guess is pretty lucky for this animal. According to Pollock, such an animal has also been mentioned by elephant hunter Henry Bailey. In a revised second edition of the Encyclopedia of Sport, this passage was not present, having been exercised by zoologist Richard Lydekker. So I guess they took it out of there because they were like, tapirs don't exist in the Congo, we're taking it out. In 1911, ornithologist Frank Finn also asserted that tapirs were once reported from Africa. However, the founding report of the water elephant's existence was that of French naturalist Charles Le Petit, who, affiliated with the Paris Natural History Museum, was exploring what is now the Republic of the Congo and also the Democratic Republic of the Congo from around 1907. Le Petit first communicated his experience to Professor Edward Louis Tressart, who published the information in La Natura in January 1911. Translations of the article were later circulated in England and the United States, initially by Richard Lydekker. At this time, Lydekker refused to offer an opinion on the subject. Shortly afterwards, animal collector John Daniel Hamlin wrote to La Natura and other periodicals confirming Le Petit's account, claiming to have met a man at Brazzaville in 1905. Brazzaville. Now, that's a place I want to visit. In 1912, Le Petit, who was then in Nairobi, sent a more detailed account of the water elephant to big game hunter Richard John Cunningham, who subsequently published this information in the Journal of East Africa and Uganda Natural History Society. Le Petit claimed to have seen a water elephant for the first time in 1907. By this time, Lydekker looked favourably on the water elephant's possible existence. Okay, so, there is word circulating about this animal, and it's this is the chronology of it basically coming to light in the Western world. Now, we've got some descriptions here from Le Petit, and that is, the water elephant stands 6 to 8 feet tall at the shoulder, with elephant-like traits such as a curved back and an elephantine gait. The ears were slightly smaller than an elephant's, but were the same shape. However, the animals also have several unique characteristics. Their necks were described as relatively long, about twice as long as a normal elephant's. The head is distinctively long and ovoid, with a short trunk of around 2 feet, reminding Le Petit strongly of a tapir. More significantly, Le Petit was unable to see any trace of tusks in any of the water elephants he allegedly saw. The animals' skins were also hairless and like a hippopotamus, smooth and shiny. Le Petit observed the animals' tracks on the ground, describing them as distinct from normal elephant tracks. They more closely resembled the tracks of a hippopotamus, with 4 separate toes, but unlike the hippo, the water elephant's weight was evidently carried on its toes, as the impression of the sole was light. That's pretty descriptive. That's pretty cool. So not only did he sight it and find physical elephants, he's also got really good sightings of its physiology. It's pretty damn cool. All right. During his sighting, Le Petit, his local helpers gave him an account of the water elephant's behavior. According to them, it is nocturnal, emerging from the water during the night to feed on strong, rank grass, and spending its day in deep water like a hippo. Now, that's not technically true. Hippos avoid deep water, but we'll let that one slide. Local people were afraid of the water elephant for its habit of rising out of the water and capsizing canoes with its short trunk, and for destroying nets and fish traps. However, the water elephant is supposed to be rare and of restricted range. Okay, another cool thing, we get to hear about some behavior that the locals have witnessed of the water elephant. So it's looking pretty good. We've got eyewitnesses, we've got physical evidence, which are the tracks, and now we've got observed behavior. That's pretty damn cool. Now we're going to go into some sightings, more descriptive sightings of the water elephant, and these are the parts I love the most. I love hearing the old school accounts of seeing this cool animal that's been undescribed by science. All right. So according to the count Le Petit gave Cunningham, twice he encountered water elephants. Beginning in 1907, his first sighting, as reported to Cunningham, occurred while he was travelling down the Congo, close to the confluence with the river Kasai. Now, there is another cryptid that lives in the Kasai region, but we'll get into that on another episode. So, according to Cunningham, his first view of a water elephant was that of a head and neck only. At some considerable distance, he saw it appearing above the water, and being in a boat, or native dugout canoe, thought it was a big tree snag. The natives with him told him it was a water elephant, and shortly afterwards it sank below the surface of the water. Okay, so his first sighting wasn't great, but he did see something. It rose out of the water, it was living, and it sunk underneath the water. It was only confirmed to be a water elephant by the locals he was with. The second sighting, which was more substantial, allegedly occurred in the swamps between Lake Leopold II, now named Lake Mai Ndombe, and Lake Tuma. It is not a tumor. Anyway, had to do it. Close to the source of the Mfini River in the latter lake, according to Tressout's account, at a place on the northern shore named Tomba Mai, according to Trossard. Okay, so that's just a location of where this second sighting occurred. It was Toma Lake, Maya, on the northern shore of Lake Leopold II that Le Petit saw these animals. That lake is situated on the left bank of the Upper Congo in the district of Lucani, which was the Belgian Congo at the time. The water elephants, which formed a small herd of 5 individuals, halted at the distance of about 500 yards in such a manner that Le Petit was enabled to observe them for some seconds before they plunged into the lake. The animals, when they caught sight of the travellers, plunged into the water and left only the summits of their heads and trunks exposed, and then they swam to the opposite shore. Cunningham's version of the second sighting was somewhat less detailed and slightly different. Okay, so I guess this has been shared a couple of times, and who knows which one is the truest account, but I think we should listen to both accounts and then basically just meet in the middle, I guess. It's probably a version of both. On the second occasion, he saw so this is Cunningham's account of what Le Petit told him. On the second occasion, he saw 5 of these animals on land and was able to look at them fully for 1 minute through his glasses, and as they were in tall grass 400 yards of distance, he had a good opportunity to observe them. He took a shot at one of them and hit it in the shoulder, but though he offered the natives an ample reward, they were never able to recover it. Okay, so that's actually quite different to Le Petit's account. This one, he's shooting at the things, they're out of the water, so yeah, I would say let's just go with the first account there. Okay, so other accounts have actually, from missionaries and things like that, have had more descriptive sightings of them. And we'll get into them because some of them are quite interesting. There are some real distinct things that are notable about these animals that kind of lend credence to that's unusual, but it's not so unusual that it's not true. It's unusual that it's kind of makes it believable, if you know what I mean. So let's get into that. Okay, so there has been a lot of accounts from helicopter pilots of them flying over some of the lakes in the Congo and seeing strange looking elephants that don't really fit the description of a general elephant. Now, some of the behavior that's described by them and also by some of the locals is really cool. So basically these elephants will spend most of their day in the water, like hippos do, and basically all you can see is things that resemble almost flowers sitting or floating at the top of the water, and that's their trunks. So they've got holding their trunks just slightly out of the water, while the rest of their body is submerged. Occasionally they'll sight the top of their heads poking out and things like that. But if you look at an elephant's trunk front on, and if you flip that facing upright in the water, they probably would just look like weird flowers floating in the water. And that's a really cool description of behavior and how they sort of spend their time. Now, back long time ago, millions of years ago, there were proboscideans that really do match the description of what these animals are said to look like. So there's a couple that come to mind, but both of them kind of don't really there's something missing, right? And that which makes it sort of discounts it from being one of these. And I don't think it is a leftover residual prehistoric animal. There was the Moriatherium, which is a proboscidean, millions of years ago, but it was too small to match the description. Then there was one, I can't remember the name of it, but it pretty much looked like an elephant, but its tusks come out the bottom jaw and point downwards, but that's way too big to be the water elephant, going by descriptions. What I think is most likely is, if it was to exist, it is an elephant, a type of elephant that just split from and speciated from normal extant elephants that still exist. And because of environmental pressures and isolation from its, ancestral elephants, it evolved in a very wet place, and it evolved to be more aquatic than your average elephant. And if we go into the whole convergent evolution thing, I mean, they've been described as looking very tapir-like. If we go by convergent evolution, where animals that aren't related to one another under the same environmental pressures will evolve to have very similar, morphological structures. Like, you look at a bat and a bird. Physiologically, there is a lot of difference, but if you look at the morphology of them, they have evolved to be, out of everywhere they could have branched out and evolved from, down different everything. One's a mammal, one's a bird, so they are very, very not even closely related. Yet they evolved to have wings and be able to fly basically the same as each other. So that's convergent evolution. So if the conditions in the Congo, which certain places are very similar to, for example, Sumatra or South America, Amazon, things like that, very similar environments, right? Which would put credence to the assumption that if there was an elephant that was living in very similar environments to tapirs, they would probably evolve to look very similar. Very same environment, same environmental pressures. They would probably evolve, they could evolve to look very similar to tapirs. And just the fact that after these things were cited, they were placed in the encyclopedia of sports for big game hunters under the classification of tapirs. And so it's pretty crazy and also a little bit convincing, right? So for me, obviously, when I talk about cryptozoology and cryptid animals on this podcast, I tend to talk more about the ones that have potential to exist. And what I also like about this is, for example, that Bill Gibbons dude, he was famous for popularizing the Mkele Mbembe, which is the sauropod dinosaur that is said to live in the Congo. Now, I don't really like taking what he says seriously, because he is a New World creationist and he's kind of hell-bent on proving that dinosaurs lived alongside humans, because that would prove that obviously the Earth isn't as old as it is, and the Earth is only, I can't remember what it is, like 3,000 years old or something like that. So he has a very distinct motive as to why he wants to popularize certain animals, because if he can prove dinosaurs still live, then he can prove that humans also lived with them. But with this water elephant, it doesn't really matter. The water elephant wasn't a dinosaur, has never been a dinosaur, yet he still heard claims of it. So it's sort of like, well, why would he even mention it if he's got nothing to gain and he can't sort of push his agenda? So that kind of makes it a bit more believable to me, that these things do exist. And again, it's one of those things that to us, oh my God, it's a water elephant. This is completely new to science. But to the locals, it's like, it's just another animal that lives here. Like, it's not crazy. It's not like a bloody dragon that lives there. It's not this huge, elaborate animal, It's not a 10-foot hominid that walks around bipedally. It's like, and this is with all due respect, it's a pretty mundane sounding animal, right? You know, to normal people, it's like, okay, if that animal had already been discovered, it would be treated just like a tapir. It wouldn't be this amazing, wow, that's crazy. It's like, yeah, well, tapirs love water. They swim. They love swimming. They swim underwater. They're great swimmers. So that's what I like about this, is it's not crazy. And I mean, compared to other animals that are said to live in the Congo, there's a pterodactyl-like animal that is said to live in the Congo. There's a, as I was saying, Kelembebe, giant sauropod, long-necked dinosaur that's said to live there. This one is probably the most chilled, and it's the boringness of it that makes it believable. Boring is believable. I'm going to put that on a shirt. And that's why, for example, I looked for the orang pendek, the bipedal ape that is said to live in Sumatra, because it wasn't a giant 8-foot ape. That's a tongue twister for you. 8-foot ape. Actually, not really. It's a 3-foot animal that walks bipedally, and gibbons, basically the entire time they are on the ground, walk bipedally. And siamang, which is the largest species of gibbon, can stand around 3 feet tall. So it's not, and obviously, the first thing you're thinking of, people are just misidentifying siamang, but no, it's very different. The locals there know what siamang look like, and this is different color, different everything. But it's because of that I went look, because I was like, okay, if there was a 10-foot animal walking bipedally through the jungle, I would go, I'm not even going to bother looking for that, because its likelihood of existing and the fact that it is so unbelievable, I'm not going to bother. But boring is believable. Now, yeah, I like that. I'm a genius. Anyway, so if you like cryptozoology, then just keep that in mind, that it's generally the most boring animals that are probably the most believable. And you got to look at Occam's razor, which is probably the most likely, the most likely explanation is probably the real one. Like if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. All right. So I don't like when people bracket everything as cryptozoology, or, like, for a perfect example, the okapi, which is a giraffid animal that lives in the Congo. And it has a similar body structure to giraffes, but its like arse is like zebra patterned. Its other end is brown. Like, it's a trippy looking animal. But it was only discovered in when was it? I want to say like 1910 or something like that. And cryptozoology uses that as basically its mascot for cryptozoology. Like, see, if this thing can go unseen, then what else can? But the thing is, no scientist that has discovered a new species has ever claimed to be a cryptozoologist. And no cryptozoologist has ever discovered a new species of animal. So just because it's undiscovered doesn't mean technically it is a cryptid, because cryptozoology means like hidden animal. Technically it is, but it's not the same thing. Cryptozoology for me is more like folklore, myth, animals, things like that. Obviously Sasquatch and stuff like that. This could just be an undiscovered species of elephant that lives in the Congo. And yes, depending on how you look at it could be cryptozoology, but could not be. But this is too mundane to be a cryptid, if you know what I mean. And I say that with all due respect, because I think animals like tapirs are absolutely amazing. They're one of my favorite animals. But to the common person that's seen it a million times on books and stuff like that, it's just another animal. That's what I'm kind of trying to say. So, does a water elephant exist? I will leave that to you to decide. What do I think? Let's rate it out of 10, its likelihood of existing. given the sightings, given there's been footprint evidence, no photos, I'd have to give it I'll give it a 4.5 out of 10 at possibility of existing. And I'll tell you what, that is insanely high. That is very high. That's almost a 50% chance that, in my opinion, this animal is out there. That is stupidly high. So 4 out of 10, if that was rating a restaurant, you wouldn't want to eat there. But cryptozoology and possibility of it existing, trust me, that's pretty high under the circumstances. All right. And by the way, this is my 4th attempt at trying to record this podcast episode, because every time I press record, something would happen. I would get somebody knocking at the door, the dogs would bark. It was just absolutely insane. So I'm glad I got through it, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next episode, we will leave the Congo, but trust me, we will be returning here in the future. Have a great weekend, everyone. Fucking weekend? It's Tuesday. Jesus Christ. Anyway, if you haven't already, check out my YouTube channel. Can't speak today. YouTube channel. And subscribe if you haven't already. I'm working on content and experimenting. So, yeah. Like, subscribe, and comment, and all that crap. And I'll see you on the next episode of Thorn's Jungle. Take care.